districts, including IA and limited industrial. CI applicable districts in all the town districts are shown on the town zoning map, section 195, 111, which is available at the town hall and in the 2017 housing production plan at page 29. Both the BOD and the CI are overlays with an underlying commercial district of IA limited industrial area. Of the 6 aspects of the purpose and intent of the BOD, 195, 143, 4 specifically address Billerica Road, 1 addresses housing, and the last one addresses residential neighborhoods. Clearly, the focus of BOD is on Billerica Road and the target area for revitalization of empty commercial buildings, including the commercial buildings along Elizabeth Drive, just inside the Billerica Road, Mill Road intersection, and those within a quarter mile of the intersection 195, 143, A through C and E. Housing within the BOD is to be compatible and complementary 195, 143D, and development projects are not to disturb residential neighborhoods or detract from the appearance of the town, section 195, 143F.
Let me take it. Okay. New section, jurisdiction. Zoning jurisdiction is specified under MGL 40A, zoning, which gives jurisdiction to the planning board as well as other boards such as the zoning board of appeals, encompassing the zoning statute, bylaws, procedures, and regulations, the zoning aspects and concerns within a town. Okay, new section, zoning district classification. All BAOD projects must comply with the CEIOD Article 21 underlying districts 195-140, Section 195-147, which is not specifically stated in the BAOD sections 195-144, but the location and boundaries of the BAOD are given in the BAOD map on file in the town offices, parentheses section 195-144, or in the Chelmsford 2017 Housing Production Plan, known as HPP, on page 30. The underlying commercial district is given in the zoning district map, known as zoning map, as IA, limited industrial. The CEIOD is applicable to all projects in the commercial districts of CA, CB, CD, CC, and IA throughout the town, section 195-111. The existing use regulation schedule, section 195, attachment 1, for both BAOD, section 195-145A, and CEIOD, section 195-112, are applicable for the underlying zoning district and where the CEIOD requires a special permit. The PD is the special permit granting authority, SPGA. Both the BAOD, section 195-144C1, along Turnpike Road and Mill Road, section 195-144, and the CID, section 195-113, allow multifamily housing with a planning board special permit. But the CIOD expressly prohibits multifamily housing in only the underlying commercial district of IA, section 195-113. BAOD created after the CIOD does not provide a modification to the CEIOD applicability and could have. New paragraph. The use regulation schedule, attachment 1, also prohibits multifamily housing in the IA. There is no separate classification for the BAOD, where there is a separate classification for CV, Center Village, Article 18A, Center Village zoning. The CV is intended to aid in revitalizing, preserving, expanding the village character of Chelmsford traditional business districts and allows residential uses as an accessory use to reinforce downtown village character. Section 195-98.1 A and B. Dimension standards for CV are delineated in Section 195-98.2, including maximum height of 35 feet and a maximum stories of as 3. Also, the CV district is specified
Density.
in attachment 1, thank you, as 6 units per acre, where there is a maximum lot size of 3 acres. There are no similar specifications for the BAOD. New paragraph. Thus, specific care is taken to ensure that the CV is consistent with the existing buildings but similar care for the residential neighborhoods along Turnpike Road and Mill Road is not directly given. Similar care should be given to these residential neighborhoods so that, consistent to the BAOD purpose and intent, multifamily housing is compatible and complementary to the existing neighborhoods, and that these neighborhoods are not disturbed. The structures do not detract from the character of town, and the structures do not detract from the character of the town. Section 195-143, especially since the CAIOD expressly prohibits multifamily housing in the underlying district of IA, 195-113, meaning a maximum height of 35 feet and maximum stories of 3. Residential neighborhoods, parenthesis, people, quality of life, and aesthetics, end parenthesis, are just as important, if not more so, as the existing structures, parenthesis, building aesthetics in the center of town. New paragraph. Although Attachment 1 prohibits multifamily housing in IA, it allows multifamily units in the CV and multifamily RM districts by Planning Board special permit. Thus, according to the BEAOD, CEIOD, and Attachment 1, multifamily housing is only allowed in CV and RM districts and requires a Planning Board special permit. Therefore, RM is the proper zoning district for multifamily units along Turnpike Road and Mill Road, not IA. New paragraph. Also, the zoning map contains a legend for the various districts in town where IA is denoted by gray and RM is denoted by orange. This map has a pre-existing area in orange along Turnpike Road as RM surrounded by the underlying IA district, because multifamily dwellings are not allowed in the IA district. At the end of the zoning map, on page 29 of the 2017 Housing Production Plan, it states, below is a map displaying the Route 129 BAOD, and the BAOD map is on page 30 of the 2017 Housing Production Plan. The legend orange designation for RM applies to the BAOD map for multifamily housing as the property boundaries along Turnpike and Mill Road are outlined in orange. There is no difference to zoning map legend application for pre-existing RM areas and the multifamily dwelling area of the BAOD. They are both orange designating RM, thus applying the RM legend to the BAOD. Multifamily housing is intentional and defining, especially since the BAOD map is revised. It's getting bad. Since the BAOD map is devised in conjunction with the BAOD bylaw as a total package from its inception and prior to any approvals, and no modifying designations made. Therefore, RM is the proper zoning districts for multifamily units along Turnpike Road and Mill Road, according to the zoning and BAOD maps. Mike, you want to pick it up?
Scale of project. The CEIOD by right building projects must apply Table 1, Site and Building Dimension Standards, Chapter 195, Attachment 3, Sections 195-114, which is a subset of Table of Dimensions requirements in Chapter 195, Attachment 2, and includes all of the zoning districts. But this project is by Planning Board special permit, not by right. Article 6, Dimensional Regulations, requires conformity to Article 4 and specifies the use of the table of dimensional requirements for the article. Chapter 195, Attachment 2, Section 195-109. As shown above, the CEIOD prohibits multifamily units in the IA, and the multifamily units allowed along Turnpike Road and Mill Road as RM districts according to the BAOD, CEIOD bylaws on the zoning and BOAD maps. Therefore, under the dimensional requirements for RM in Attachment 2, the maximum height is 35 feet and the maximum number of stories is 3, among other specifications. The project design dramatically exceeds these requirements. In addition, the CEIOD requires the project to be in harmony with the objectives and intent of the bylaw, Section 195, 118A1, and show compatibility and integration with its surroundings, Section 195, 118B2. This is in addition to the BAOD purpose and intent for complementary and compatible projects that do not disturb the neighborhoods or detract from the town. The project scale overwhelms the existing residential neighborhoods at 4 and 5 stories, with maximum heights of 51 feet 10 inches and 63 feet 2 inches, respectively, and abuts residential properties to the back and side of the property, and faces residential properties on Turnpike Road. Therefore, the scale of the project is not in harmony with the residential multifamily dwelling objective and intent of either the BAOD or CEIOD, and not within the specifications for RM, and it is neither compatible nor integrates with the surrounding residential neighborhoods. Density of project. Zoning density is the specific jurisdiction of the planning board, and density is a well-established zoning parameter. See Brian A. Gardner, Editor-in-Chief, Black's Law Dictionary, Edition 8. Pages 1069 to 1070. Although density criteria is only specified directly in the zoning bylaws for CV, Attachment 1, it is defined in terms of the bylaws, zoning districts, and is specified in the 2017 Housing Production Plan at page 28, on page 100 of the 2011 Housing Production Plan, for residential designations of RA, RB, RC, and multifamily, as well as commercial densities for multifamily units within the applicable commercial districts of the CEIOD. After the density table, it references the zoning map with the commercial zoning district per the CEIOD. The Route 129 BAOD is listed in with any commercial district per the CEIOD. Under the commercial high-density multifamily housing, 11 plus units per acre, where the plus is defined as up to 16 units in the 2011 Housing Production Plan. The commercial multifamily low, 4 to 6 units per acre, and medium, 6 to 10 units per acre, densities are defined as any commercial district per the CEIOD. But the CEIOD expressly prohibits multifamily dwellings in the underlying district of IA, and Route 129 BAOD has a CEIOD underlying district of IA. Therefore, Route 129 BAOD is improperly listed under the commercial multifamily high density. The proper listing for Route 129 BAOD is under the definitions for 2, 3, and 4 family per acre, attached, detached, and conversion for any residential C, RC, and M, RM, multifamily district. This is consistent with the bylaws, zoning, and BOAD map and Attachment 1 and Attachment 2. Just below the zoning criteria table, it states, below is a map displaying the commercial zoning districts per the CEIOD, zoning district map on page 29, extending to the BAOD map on page 30, a clear reference and connection to the bylaws and its various districts as well. Therefore, density is defined in terms of the zoning district of the bylaws and is the jurisdiction of the planning board. It is the town's administrative choice to place the density criteria in the housing production plan instead of the bylaws directly or in addition to it. But this does not sever the connection between the density criteria and the bylaws. Also, the zoning map and the BAOD map are only in the 2017 housing production document. Neither one is in the bylaws directly, but this does not sever the connection between the zoning and BAOD maps and the bylaws. No effectiveness is diminished or lost. The same is applicable for the zoning parameter of density. As stated above in the project overview, the project is unwilling to reduce the density that it has specified for its project, 168 units based on square footage and adding 25% of its 140 base units as affordable housing units, low and moderate income. There are 2 references to square footage for multifamily units. 1, the CEIOD at section 195-113 for minimum gross floor area requirements. A, studio unit 500 square feet. B, 1-bedroom unit 700 square feet. C, 2-bedroom unit 900 square feet. And D, 3-bedroom unit 1,200 square feet. And 2, RM on attachment 2 and note 1 for multifamily dwellings no less than 80,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet, whichever is greater. A similar note does not apply for IA. The maximum building coverage for RM is 15%, and for IA is 40%. And the project is not using 50%. It is using by right specs instead of for PB special permit project. There is nothing in MGL Chapter 40A or the bylaws that give developers jurisdiction to define its own project density. Developers do not have the jurisdiction to define zoning density criteria for the town. This comes under the jurisdiction of the planning board alone. Therefore, the planning board needs to establish a density for this project, base units, from which the affordable unit set aside of 25% is determined, and changes the composition of the base units. See inclusionary housing bylaw section below.
Why don't I pick it up, Mike?
Okay. And based on the above, the RM criteria for density shall be used. At 4 units per acre on about 9 acres is 36 units with 9 affordable units.
Good. Okay, inclusionary housing bylaw. The CEIOD requires projects with 4 or more units to comply with the inclusionary housing bylaw, Article 23, Section 195-111F. The inclusionary housing bylaw applies to the CEIOD, Village Center Overlay District, and residential multifamily, RM District, with 4 or more units, Section 195-134. Must provide for affordable housing, Section 195-134, Section 195-137, prior to considering the possibility of a density bonus. Section 195-138E for full rate units. Okay. Density bonus for full rate units is conditioned by the planning board discretion from 0% up to 20% of a project's total base units. It is not mandatory, Section 195-138E. Since the basis for the density bonus is dependent upon the proper number of base units, zoning criteria is also inherently incorporated within the bylaws. Thus, the planning board could grant a density bonus from 0% up to 20% of the base units, depending upon a showing of exceptional design and/or public benefit, which is then added to the qualifying base units at full rate. But prior to this consideration, the planning board shall require any project subject to Article 23 to be conditioned upon, i.e., or parenthesis, set aside 25% of the project's base units as a restriction for affordable housing units, Section 195-137. Thus, the 25% provisional affordable housing units are restricted upon or within a project's base unit. It is not added to. For the project number scheme of 140 base units, this translates to 35 affordable housing units. Excuse me, just 35 affordable units plus 105 full rate units. A density bonus range of 0 to 20% would add to the full rate units, but the project added 28 units to the affordable housing, but the project added 28 units for affordable housing to its 140 base units and came up with 168 base units, 68 units. Thus, a project with 36 base units with a 25% set aside for affordable units has a composition of 27 full rate units with 9 affordable units. If a density bonus is granted, it could range from 0 up to 20% at the planning board's discretion. Therefore, the project far exceeds the density for Turnpike Road and far exceeds the dimensional criteria. In summary, the project does not mean the town's bylaws as the BAOD, CIOD, Use Regulations Schedule Attachment 1, Dimensional Requirements Attachment 2, Zoning Map, and BAOD Map demonstrate that a multifamily housing project in the BAOD and CIOD with the underlying commercial district of IA is A, prohibited in the IA, B, properly designated as a residential multifamily district RM by zoning attachment 1, C, the scale is defined by RM of zoning attachment 2, including a maximum height of 35 feet, maximum stories of 3, maximum building coverage of 15%. D, zoning density for RM and other districts as defined, connected and applicable to the bylaws. And E, the planning board has jurisdiction over the zoning density. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration and attention to this matter. Best regards, Ms. Bowman.
So
Thank you, Rep.
the next letter was, I had saw a draft, and the draft was rather lengthy, and I asked the maker of the previous letter to provide an executive summary. So the question is, the maker's here in the audience, do you want me to read the executive summary as well? Or are you satisfied we read the whole letter into the record?
Does that, I would just ask, does that mean that the executive summary does not make it into the record?
No, it'll be recognized in the record, and I'll take that motion.
Okay, so as long as it's recognized in the record, and I assume you'll be reading town council's response.
And your response that you sent at 6:28 tonight.
And so the majority of that is summarized within the executive summary, and then I'll just add a couple things to that. And I'd like to draw a picture, which I think can display to you exactly what I am saying. So one picture is worth 1,000 words. And ask for any questions.
When I get to the public session, we'll...
Okay, yes, no, yes, absolutely.
So if I take a motion that we waive the reading of your executive summary, as long as it's in the record,
Correct.
does the applicant have any problem with that? Anyone from the audience have any problem with that?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Mike to waive the reading of the executive summary, and note that it will be in the record. Seconded by Glenn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So the next letter we have is from Paul Haverty, Plattman, Dombrowski, and Haverty, attorneys at law. This is in response to that letter. Evan, you have asked us to review the letter dated October 23rd, 2017, submitted to the Chelmsford Planning Board by Chris Bowman, containing additional questions regarding above reference application. Many of the questions in the October 23rd, 2017 letter addresses issues already addressed in our prior letter dated October 10th, 2017. And the board should refer to that letter as well. AOD Overlay Overview. Ms. Bowman's letter addresses the adoption of the Business Amenities Overlay District for Chelmsford Town Meeting 2016. She notes the map showing the boundaries of the overlay district contained in the 2017 Housing Production Plan and are available in Town Hall, but are not yet shown on the official zoning map. The zoning map will eventually be updated to show the recently adopted overlay districts. The maps approved by the town meeting showing the location of the overlay districts are acceptable. Ms. Bowman notes that Section 195-143F of the BAOD states the projects are not to disturb residential neighborhoods or detract from the appearance of the town. The bylaw actually goes on to state as additional criteria that such development shall result in the maintenance of a balanced and workable relationship between the existing office, business park, new business amenities, and adjacent residential neighborhoods. This requirement should inform the board in the exercise of its discretion when determining whether to grant the requested special permit. Jurisdiction. Ms. Bowman argues again that the Community Enhancement Investment Overlay District, COD, specifically prohibits multifamily housing in the industrial zoning district, as does the use table for the industrial zoning district. However, the BAOD enacted subsequent to the CIOD expressly allows multifamily housing in the BAOD. While the board may wish to consider future zoning amendment to remove this ambiguity between the CIOD and the BAOD, it is indisputable that the latter enacted zoning provision will control and that the multifamily housing is allowed within the industrial zoning district where permitted by the BAOD. Ms. Bowman discusses the Center Village and RM zoning districts as well, arguing the proper zoning district for multifamily uses along Turnpike Road and Mill Road is the RM zoning district. This bylaw does not reference either the Center Village or the RM zoning districts in relation to the BAOD, and subject to the property is located within the industrial zoning district. Application of the RM zoning district requirements to the project would be arbitrary and capricious and would subject the board's decision to a legal challenge. Scale of the project. The issue of the scale of the project was addressed in our prior correspondence. The BAOD leaves the density of a proposed project within the overlay district to the discretion of the board, subject to the siting criteria, the siting requirements contained in the bylaw. The board should review whether the proposed project is within the requirements contained in the BAOD and the CIOD. The board should not look to the requirements of other zoning districts as a basis for its decision, as only the requirements of the applicable bylaws may be properly imposed. Density of the project. The issue of density was also discussed on previous correspondence. The bylaw has left the appropriate density of the project within the BAOD to the discretion of the board as part of the special permit process. Board should review the proposal in a manner consistent with the criteria of the BAOD and CIOD and consistent with the criteria for issuing special permits contained in sections 195-103B 1 through 6 of the bylaws. As noted in our previous letter, the density requirements of BAOD are not contained in the HPP, which is a separate planning document containing density suggestions for an unplanned housing production pursuant to General Law, Chapter 40B, Sections 20 through 23. Inclusionary Housing Bylaw. The Inclusionary Housing Bylaw is contained within Article 23 of the bylaws. This bylaw sets the standard for affordability in the CIOD and the BAOD overlay districts, as well as in the Village Center and RM districts. The bylaw specifically states that its purpose is to provide affordable housing to developments in a ratio equivalent to the project approved pursuant to General Law, Chapter 40B, and Sections 20 to 23. The project before the board proposed 168 rental units, 20% of which will be affordable at a 50% of the area median income. This affordability ratio is compliant with the requirements in General Law, Chapters 40B, Sections 20 to 23, and will allow the inclusion of all 168 units on the town's subsidized housing inventory. The discussion of the base number of units and density bonus where there is no underlying density requirement is not applicable. The board should simply review the compliance with the requirements to allow all of the units to count on the town's SHI. Summary. In her summary, Ms. Bowman provides a number of conclusions which are included below with my responses in boldface. Ms. Bowman states that a multifamily project in BAOD and CID located within the IA zoning district is A. Prohibited in IA. As discussed above, the BAOD expressly allows multifamily residential within IA zoning district, and this provision supersedes the early enacted provision contained in the CIOD. B. Properly designated as residential multifamily district RM by zoning attachment 1. Response. The property is located within the IA zoning district and the BAOD overlay zoning district and the CIOD overlay zoning district. The project is not located within the RM zoning district. C. The scale is defined by RM of zoning attachment 2, including a maximum height of 35 feet, maximum stories 3, maximum building coverage of 15%. As discussed above in our prior letter, the property is not located within the RM zoning district and may not be subject to requirements of the RM zoning district. D. Zoning density for RM and other districts is defined, connected, and applicable to the bylaws. Response. As previously noted, the BAOD does not contain a minimum density for a multifamily housing that requires the requirements of the RM zoning district may not be applicable to the BAOD. But the board is subject to citing criteria in the BAOD, CIOD, and the sections 103B 1 through 6 of the bylaws. E. The planning board has jurisdiction over zoning density. Response. The board does have jurisdiction over issue of density through its application of the citing criteria contained in BAOD, CIOD, and sections 103B 1 through 6. As with any other special permit application, the board has discretion subject to the express criteria listed above or whether or not to issue a special permit. Board's discretion is not unlimited, as any decision it makes may not be arbitrary, capricious, whimsical, or legally unattainable. If you have any questions regarding the correspondence, please feel free to contact me. So in response to that letter, we have another letter from Chris Bowman, and I would ask Mike to start it.
With pleasure.
This letter, by the way, came at 6:30 this evening. So.
Okay. Dear Planning Board Chair and members, this letter is in response to Town Council's letter of 10/25/2017. The crux of the issue is the applicability of the CEIOD to the BAOD. From this, the issues of dimensional requirements and density flow. This is delineated in the letter and executive summary I sent to the Planning Board dated October 23rd, 2017, as well as prior correspondence. The response follows the summary numbered bullets of Town Council's letter and opinion, bold-faced, and is italicized. A. Prohibited in the IA, to which Town Council responded, as discussed above, the BAOD expressly allows multifamily residential within the IA zoning district, and this provision supersedes the earlier enacted prohibition contained in the CEIOD. Response A. Yes, the BAOD, Article 24, expressly allows the use of residential multifamily housing per 195-145C1. But the underlying district is not expressly stated, 195-144, and must be determined from the zoning map, which is in the Chelmsford 2017 Housing Production Plan, HPP, on page 29. From this, it is clearly seen from the zoning map legend that areas around Turnpike Road and Mill Road are in gray and have the designation for the underlying commercial district of IA, light industrial. Town Council, Mr. Haverty, suggests that since the BAOD 2016 allows residential multifamily housing, RMF, and 195-145C1, that this supersedes the CEIOD 2013 because the BAOD came after the CEIOD. But there is more to the BAOD that affects all BAOD projects, including RMF projects. The BAOD also expressly states that the CEIOD shall apply to all BAOD projects, 195-147. This subsection is part and parcel of the BAOD bylaw and does not modify or qualify BAOD's applicability to the CEIOD. By the CEIOD bylaw itself, Article 21, it is applicable to specific underlying commercial districts, CA, CB, CC, CD, and IA, 195-111, meaning the special attributes of the CEIOD are imposed upon the applicable underlying commercial districts, like IA in this case. The CEIOD allows RMF as well, but expressly prohibits such RMF in the commercial underlying districts of IA, 195-113. So once a project comes forth for the BAOD and conforms to the allowed uses by the BAOD, 195-145, the CEIOD then applies to that project by BAOD, 195-147, and by CEIOD applicability to the specific underlying commercial districts per 195-111 for the underlying commercial district of IA. Thus, by both bylaw pathways, the BAOD must comply with the CEIOD for the underlying IA district, and the CEIOD special attributes are imposed upon the IA district, and includes the express prohibition of RMF in the IA. Therefore, RMF is expressly prohibited in the CEIOD, and this is applicable to the BAOD. B, properly designated as a residential multifamily district RM by zoning, attachment A1. The property is located, this is the response from Town Council. The property is located within the IA zoning district, the BAOD Overlay Zoning District, and the CEIOD Overlay Zoning District. The project is not located within the RM zoning district. Response B. Yes, as shown in the above response A, the BAOD is located in the underlying IA district, and the CEIOD applies to the IA underlying district. But by both the BAOD bylaw and CEIOD bylaw, RMF is prohibited in the IA. And the existing use regulation schedule, Chapter 195, Attachment 1, is applicable to both the BAOD, 195-45, and the CEIOD, 195-112 bylaws. Attachment 1 expressly states that RMF is prohibited in the IA without a modification or qualification to this prohibition, but is only permitted by Planning Board special permit for the districts of residential multifamily, RM, and Center Village, CV, Article 18A. The CEIOD is not applicable to the CV, and Attachment 1 specifies that RMF in CV is restricted to the maximum height of 35 feet and maximum of 3 stories. All other multifamily dwelling requirements apply. Article 12, multifamily dwellings, and Article 2 through 13A are applicable. Also, Article 1 specifies a density of 6 acres per acre, and gets 6 units per acre, with a minimum acreage of 3 acres. Thus, Attachment 1 qualifies the dimensional and density requirements for CV, but not for the BAOD or CEIOD, because the CEIOD bylaw expressly prohibits RMF in the IA. Since RMF is prohibited in the IA, the only other available districts are RM or CV. The CEIOD is not applicable to CV, and the BAOD is not within the boundaries of the CV per the zoning map. But the zoning map legend designates orange for RM and gray for IA. The BAOD allows RMF along the residential roads of Turnpike Road and Mill Road per the BAOD map, dated August 24th, 2017. That's in 195, 144, and 2017 Housing Production Plan, page 30. The BAOD map is created in conjunction with the BAOD bylaw text prior to any approvals. The property boundaries along these roads are outlined in orange without qualification or modification, even though the legend provides a color scheme for IA. Thus, the BAOD map designates the RMF area along Turnpike Road and Mill Road as RM by design and is defining for this RMF area per the BAOD map, 195, 144. And RM is the appropriate district and requirements for the RMF area in the BAOD.
Oh, you get that?
Yeah, why don't you pick it up at C?
Okay, C. The scale is, okay. The scale is defined by RM of zoning attachment 2, including a maximum height of 35 feet, maximum stories of 3, and maximum building coverage of 15%. As discussed above and in our prior letter, the property is not located within the RM zoning district and may not be subject to the requirements of the zoning district. That was from Mr. Haverty. Now here's the response. As shown above in response A and B, prior correspondence, the most appropriate district for the BAOD allowable use of RMF is RM based upon the BAOD, CIOD, Attachment 1 zoning map and BAOD map. Thus, the Table of Dimensional Requirements, Section 195, Attachment 2 for RM is applicable to the project. Okay, we're going to read another response from Mr. Haverty. Zoning density for RM and other districts is defined, connected, and applicable to the bylaws. As previously noted, the BAOD does not contain a minimum density for multifamily housing. The requirements of the RM zoning district may not be applied to the BAOD, but the board is subject to the citing criteria of the BAOD, CIOD, in Section 103B 1 to 6 of the bylaws. Okay, response D. Article 19, Administration and Enforcement, Section 195 103, is specific to special permits and subsections 195-103B 1 to 6 address criteria. These subsections do not change the special permit criteria by the planning board. As shown in the above responses, although the BAOD allows RMF, the CEIOD applies to the BAOD and the IA and expressly prohibits RMF in the IA. But the BAOD map specifies the location for, and the zoning map legend shows that the BAOD RMF areas are designated in orange as RM, and Attachment 1 prohibits RMF in the IA. By the virtue of the zoning parameter of density, it is defined per the zoning districts administratively placed in the 2017 Housing Production Plan as the BAOD and zoning maps are administratively placed in the 2017 HPP. The planning board has jurisdiction over the zoning parameters under MGL 40A.
Can we take it from here?
Yeah, please.
E, the planning board has jurisdiction over zoning density. Response, the board, the board does have jurisdiction over the issue of density through its application. The citing criteria contained in the BAOD, CIOD, and the sections 103B 1 through 6. As with any other special permit application, the board has discretion subject to express criteria listed above on whether or not to issue a special permit. The board's discretion is not unlimited, as any decision it makes may not be arbitrary, capricious, whimsical, or illegally unattainable. Response to E. Yes, the planning board has jurisdiction over the issue of density and may or may not change the applicable bylaws to the project under review for planning board special permit. A special permit criteria delineated under sections 195, 103, Article 19 for the special permit granting authority, which is the planning board in this instance. Please see above response of a planning board to base its decision on special permit criteria and applying the specific language of BAOD and CIOD bylaws with attachment 1 and the BAOD map and the zoning map does not constitute an arbitrary, capricious, whimsical, or legally unattainable decision. In fact, it strengthens the planning board's decision. Also, the Inclusionary Housing Bylaw, Article 23, is discussed in depth prior to correspondence, whereby this bylaw requires a set-aside of 5% for affordable housing, low and moderate income units, from the project's base units, resulting in a project composition of 25% affordable housing, 75% full-rate units. Project is a private project subject to local bylaws of inclusionary housing as an alternative initiative to incorporate affordable housing for low and moderate income families. It is not a comprehensive permit project, but it allows total project units as part of the subsidized housing inventory, because the whole project is subsidized. For this project, it is not subsidized, so only units that count towards SHI are 25% of the base units per the bylaw, as long as the Department of Housing and Community Development Regulation 760 CMR 56.00, I don't know what that means.
Entire sequence.
Entire sequence. Thank you. And guidelines are adhered to for these types of units. I'm not an attorney, so, you know, it's difficult.
But you played one.
In addition, as far as the BAOD purpose and intent, sections 195, 143F, that addresses the neighborhoods directly, not disturbing the neighborhoods or detracting from the appearance of the town. Mr. Haverty emphasized the second phrase of the subsection states, will result in the maintenance of a balanced and workable relationship between the existing office business park, new business amenities, and adjacent residential neighborhoods. Second phase directly extends from the prior subsections at 195, 143A through 195, 143E, where business amenities and access to them are specific to commercial buildings on Billerica Road. New commercial uses prohibited from RMF areas, Turnpike and Mill Roads, preserving IA on Billerica Road, and are supposed to preserve and enhance the aesthetic qualities of Billerica Road, and which do not detract from the non-disturbance of residential neighborhoods or aesthetics of the town. Add to this fact that the Billerica Road is a commercial road from Alpha Road to Chelmsford Billerica Line, and Turnpike Road, Mill Road are residential roads. And this second phase draws a distinction between the existing office business park and the residential neighborhoods, which exist decades prior to the office business park, and this distinction should inform the board in the exercise of its discretion when determining whether to grant a requested special permit. Quote from Mr. Haverty's letter dated October 25th, 2017. Thank you for your consideration of these responses and your decision-making process. Best regards, Chris Bowman, 3 Julio Street. Paul, you don't want to. You don't want to answer that. Do you want to answer that last response to your response?
I don't feel the need to answer the response to the response. I think I can answer any questions you may have regarding the series of correspondence, if there are any.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we have any at this time, but let's
Okay.
just,
Well, I'm here if you need me.
we'll get there, I'm sure.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Katie
Hold on one
Enright.
second.
Sure.
Yeah, why don't we take a
We're
break?
going to take a 3-minute break,
Sure.
okay? And you get yourself set up. We just need a glass of water because we did a lot of reading. We don't usually do a lot of talking.
So you're gonna give me. Yeah.
There's too many places to go with that one.
No.
Oh, well. All sorts of places. But then, you know.
Okay.
Out there. Oh, dear. I just got Ed.
I'm still waiting for Ed.
That's okay.
Them in a while.
No.
So seeing that we're all back, we'll get started.
All right, good evening, everyone. Katie Enright, civil engineer for this project with Howard Stein Hudson. My office is at 114 Turnpike Road in Chelmsford. Just to update you briefly, since the last meeting, we have been back to Conservation Commission and have received an order of conditions for the project as presented to you in a revised set of plans that was submitted a little over a week and a half ago. So we have finished that step. We did also have a traffic peer review done, and Mr. Dirk is here tonight to update you as to the traffic peer review. We did have a chance to respond to him, which we actually went over in subcommittee, which took place at 6 o'clock this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dirk to talk about his peer review.
Each of you should have a copy of
Yeah.
his memo.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Jeffrey Dirk with Vanessa and Associates, and we're the traffic engineers for the town conducting a peer review of the project, as Katie had mentioned. So you should, as the chair had mentioned, you should have a letter in your file dated October 19th that is the summary of my review. And what we were tasked for is basically checking the traffic study to make sure that it was consistent with state standards, to make sure that the analysis and the methodology that was used was correct. And in the end, it's really to make sure that what is presented to you in terms of the overall impact of the project on the transportation infrastructure, and then ultimately what the improvements may be, are sufficient to address what the impacts actually are. So we've gone through the analysis that was conducted as a part of the project. We've reviewed the site plans, and our overall findings was that the methodology that was used is consistent with state standards. So the information that you have upon which to form the basis of rendering an opinion relative to the project is consistent with industry standards and good practices. So it's a reliable document. We did ask that the applicant, and they've since responded, address some technical issues relative to some of the analysis that was performed, specifically at 2 locations. And those are the locations that we talked about in the subcommittee meeting that would be the focus of some potential further review for improvements. So those 2 locations are at the Bill Ricker Road, Golden Cove Road, Turnpike Road intersection, and the traffic signal that's there. There were some technical issues relating to the analysis that we've asked them to go back and address, and basically reanalyze the intersection to address some inconsistencies that we found. They've done that, and they've delivered a response letter to us that was dated today. One of the things we asked them to look at that location, as you're probably very familiar with, is during the morning peak hour, that intersection is very congested, dealing with both the school traffic and commuter traffic that's going through the location. So we had asked them to look at some potential for improvements at that intersection. So they've delivered that analysis to us. And one of the things that we talked about in the subcommittee meeting was the improvements that they're talking about there, speaking of there, would deal with retiming the traffic signal and potentially changing some of the ways that the lanes are used on the Golden Cove Road approach. So they've done some analysis of that, and speaking at the subcommittee meeting and with the town engineer, the analysis basically shows is that you can play around with the traffic signal timing that's there, but you're really not going to get the intersection to operate much better. The same thing with some changes in the lane usage on Golden Cove Road. So what we've suggested, and we'd be working with the applicant and with town staff, is developing a potential condition that relates to looking at that intersection after the project is actually built and there's real traffic from the project going through that location, and addressing what the impacts may be on the Turnpike Road approach to the intersection. As you might imagine, as we add more traffic to that approach, it needs more time to actually get the traffic to clear through there. There's not a lot of vehicles on that approach today, but when the project is built, it will obviously add some traffic to that approach and will potentially require some adjustments of the traffic signal timing at that time. So we'll be looking at a potential condition that would require what we've determined as kind of a look-back procedure at that location. The other intersection is at the other end of the Turnpike Road corridor, so at Mill Road. That intersection historically has had a high number of motor vehicle crashes. The crashes at that intersection tend to be single vehicles going through there. And so we had asked that the applicant take a look at, what are the causes of the crashes there, and to potentially develop some remedial measures. As you might know or recall, for the 276 Mill Road project, there is a series of improvements that are to be constructed at that location. That project actually has a condition that requires that the applicant at a certain stage or prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, they need to deliver monies to the town so that the town can actually go out and complete some sight line and safety improvements at that intersection. So what we've looked at as a part of this project, given the fact that the crashes are still happening at that location and the improvements haven't taken place yet, is a similar thing to what we had mentioned at the Golden Cove Road intersection, is to have a look-back provision for that intersection. And the look-back, rather than looking at the way the intersection operates, what it would be is, after the town has had the benefit of constructing the improvements there, and hopefully safety is addressed, the applicant would then go back and look at to see how effective those improvements have been. And if in fact they're not effective, the report would actually deliver to the town existing conditions as they relate to safety at that intersection, how the project may be impacting those conditions, and then if needed, there would be a series of recommendations relating to further enhancements to safety that may need to take place at that location. So relative to the traffic study, those were kind of the primary findings and what we had asked that the applicant look at and what we discussed in the subcommittee meeting. There were also some comments relating to the site plan itself. They're generally minor in nature. The applicant has since, as I mentioned, delivered a response letter that said that they will incorporate all of the items that we've asked them to address relative to the site plan itself. So that's a brief overview of our findings. It's an 11-page letter, and I'm glad you don't have to read that in the record, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have relative to our review, the impacts of the project, and the discussion that we had in the subcommittee meeting relating to these transportation improvements.
Jeff and Henry are on the subcommittee. I know Henry came late. Jeff, do you want to talk about it at this point, or you want to wait? If you have any points that you want to bring forward, or you want to wait till later?
Yeah, I can wait till later.
Okay. Okay. Any questions from the board? Monica?
Not at this time. I need to.
Glenn? Ed?
Well said, thank you.
Mike?
No, I'm fine.
Henry? Nan? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I believe the other aspects, so the two aspects that Jeff talked about today, as far as the two look-backs at either end of the road, we talked to, obviously the applicant was at subcommittee today, and he's committed to doing both of those look-backs if that becomes a condition of approval. We also have the town here tonight, the Assistant DPW Director, to talk about their plans for Turnpike Road and update the board as to what the future plans are for improvements to Turnpike Road. So that was a question of the board, so if Steve can come up.
Good evening.
Who are you?
It's been a while. Stephen Yonley, Assistant Director of Public Works. Just to speak to Turnpike Road, I guess it has come up a few times here at the hearings. It was identified in the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan. We had it on our kind of sidewalk plan anyway, but now it's kind of, codified in the Complete Streets Plan. The desired date for construction is 2023. Obviously, that kind of can slide around depending on funding. you know, the Complete Streets plan indicates or, you know, carries full length of Turnpike Road for sidewalks, so that's Billrica Road to Mill Road. Carries a price tag of about $950,000. So obviously, you know, funding is a question. You know, so that's you know, about 6 years out. You know, we can apply again for some Complete Streets funding. They'll fund up to $400,000. So maybe we can, you know, split the project in half. You know, we got, if you're aware, we just got $330,000 from the state for Complete Streets for a few different projects around town. Out front here is one of them. So, you know, we have the opportunity to reapply in that time for additional funds. As far as that, the road is in, you know, fairly decent shape. You know, there's some gas work on the far side, the Mill Road side. You know, I'd echo what Mr. Dirk stated about the intersections at both ends. You know, I concur with all that. You know, as the board is aware, we have a project creeping up the DOT's tip schedule for Billrica and Riverneck Road. You know, it's some intersection improvements, some widening, sidewalks both sides, culvert replacement, you know, some turn lanes to get up to Riverneck Road to help in the, hopefully that will help alleviate some of the backup congestion that gets back in through the Golden Cove Turnpike intersection. We've talked internally at DPW about that signal. You know, the timing is maximized as was stated. You know, for the AM peak, because as I'm sure everybody here is aware, Golden Cove will back all the way to Chelmsford Street, if not up Stedman, and Billrica Road obviously goes all the way back to the square. It chunks, you know, it maximizes time. And as was stated, if we see the need to add more time to Turnpike in the AM, you know, that timing has to come from someplace. So we'll, you know, but there's no sense putting the cart before the horse and adjusting timing now if we don't have to. So I'm in agreement that we wait and, you know, 12 months after or so and reassess the effects of the project.
Questions?
Happy to answer any if you have.
Dan, Henry, Mike?
No, I'm fine.
Nothing. Glenn, Ed?
Quick question. Have you thought about traffic calming on Mill Road? We've heard about complaints of speeding. You were good with speed bumps in the center. We're gonna be putting in a crosswalk here with signs and
Well,
blinkers.
are you talking on Turnpike Road?
Turnpike, yeah, what did I say?
Mill Road.
Sorry.
That's okay. I knew what you were getting at.
Streets are going around my mind right now.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with Turnpike Road, you know, as everybody knows, it's dead straight start to finish.
Yeah.
You know, just a few kind of, you know, hills, vertical curves, if you will. I believe the crosswalk as presented with the rapid flash like we have on Golden Cove and spots through the center, and we installed the set also up, you know, 27 at Landry's there. I think that there's proper sight distance and everything like that. I don't know necessarily if you know, I just don't want to take that crosswalk that's proposed by the applicant and make that a raised crosswalk and have that just be the only one. Because what you're going to have is a raised crosswalk not even 100 feet from the intersection of Warren Ave. So people are going to slow down, go up and over, and hammer down when you get on the other side of it. You know, so you'd have to corridor the whole thing, and I don't want to take a street and have a series of speed bumps, if you will.
Okay.
So, you know, if you follow what I'm getting at.
Thank you for your answer.
Sure.
The work that's on MassDOT over at Billrica and Riverneck.
Mm-hmm.
Does that take into account that offshoot in front of the Workers' Credit Union?
Yep.
Coming more square into that intersection?
Yeah, the project, it pretty much starts there, because there's the little stretch of sidewalk to get over the culvert that has to be constructed. That's part of the reason for widening the culvert. So there is a slight bit of reconfiguration at that. I mean, that's yield controlled, so that's right turn only coming out of there. So the gist of it's not going to change. There'll be a little modification, but it'll more or less be what it is.
Okay. So with hopefully the improvements of that intersection, that little...
Well, yeah, the addition of the turn lane to get up Riverneck Road to stop people from, you know, because of certain times of day, if somebody's trying to take a left up Riverneck, that traffic will stack all the way back to the signal. So if you can get 2-3 cars over,
Sure.
you know, you can allow through traffic.
I'm just
to
thinking
go.
of people coming up Turnpike and
Mhm.
taking a right onto Billerica
Mhm.
Road. We'll have that,
Mhm.
and stay out of the main Golden Cove, Billerica Road intersection.
Mhm.
You know, they get a little further down, so. Okay,
While Steve's here, as part of the subcommittee meeting, we discussed options as to how the project could build additional sidewalks along Turnpike as part of their 53G contribution. You just want to speak as to what the hurdle is, the hurdle right now?
Yeah, I mean, with the Turnpike Road side, there is no layout, if you will. There's no defined right-of-way, so it's kind of, it's all over. The road shifts, you know, people own, you know, the property line's a foot off the pavement. So in our plan, the sidewalk is to run down the project side of the street. So as you get closer to work, you have not only property issues, but you have wetland issues, obviously. You know, that's riverfront, is the endangered species wood turtle in there. So there's some hurdles, you know, there's some surveying, engineering, and permitting work that has to go on with that prior to construction. So as we talked about, you know, maybe with the 53G money, you know, Evan suggested maybe we go the other direction on Turnpike, maybe a small stretch to get to the fire lane coming out the end of Alpha Road, where you get the, you know, the businesses that empty and they all go and walk up either through the, you know, Kensington neighborhood, or they go up Warren Ave. So, you know, we can investigate doing something like that. You know, it's 400 or 500 feet away from the applicant's property, I believe, just off the top of my head, to get to that fire road. But, you know, it's, again,
any thoughts on the other subject that they brought up about the survey?
yeah, I mean, that's also another alternative, you know, so we're one step closer, you know, as we get to like actual construction date, or really have it in the queue. You know, we're one step closer as we have a survey. You know, like, as I said in the subcommittee, you know, we could start design in-house, you know, and be ready to roll. You know, I don't want to do conservation permitting and stuff because that has an expiration date, you know, but as we get, you know, a year or so away, yeah, then I could start doing that.
Will the survey help you?
Oh, absolutely.
The point here is that if the survey and layout of Turnpike Road were already in place, then I think the board, working with engineering, could pursue having the developer actually build sidewalks beyond their frontage. The fact that the survey is not in place, we're not in a position to even contemplate having the developer build the sidewalks. The developer will make the 32,653G contribution. The board in engineering can have a private offline conversation as to how you want to use that money. You don't need to make that a condition of the permit. So if the board wants to work with engineering to spend some of that money to do a survey or a partial survey, that's well within the board's authority.
And so the board is aware that the 129 corridor account, that 53G account, has just a shade under $34,000 in it currently.
Yeah. So I don't want to put words in the applicant's mouth. I think what I heard when I sat in the audience for the subcommittee was one of the options to use some of that 53G money, and they would conduct a survey. Is that something we should explore or not explore? Or?
Again, it only helps us.
All right.
I was just curious as to what the cost of an adequate survey of Turnpike Road from end to end would actually be. That's a fairly long stretch.
Well,
I asked our surveyor that did the survey, WSP out of Nashville, that did the survey for this property, for this project, where they're already on the layout, at least in front of our property, to do a full existing conditions plan. Excuse me, from 104 Turnpike to the intersection.
Right.
Basically, workers' credit union from side to side, locate pavement, striping, all the utilities, wetland flags along the layout would be about $22,000.
Oh, okay. Not quite as horrible as I'd imagine.
Right, that's only our project
To 129.
Right.
It doesn't go
Right.
the other way.
So presumably it'd be about the same in the other direction. It's
Yeah,
about
I
the
would,
same
yeah,
distance.
safe bet to double it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, that gives an order of magnitude.
Something. Any other questions from the board? Evan, any other?
All set.
Katie, anything else for him? You're all set? You're good?
For this aspect.
Okay. Thank you.
Here we go.
Okay. So, do you have any further presentation? You want to talk about anything else?
Just a few minor things that was addressed at that was requested at the last hearing. This is a copy of the sightline drawing, and I have an 11 by 17 I can give you of this that Nan had requested at the last meeting. So what we did was we looked at the sidewalk on our side of the road and basically the frontage along the other side of the road and drew sightlines through the property. So what you see on the top elevation is looking through the two-story building. So essentially looking from the sidewalk on our side of the site past or over the two-story building, and then from the opposite side of the road past the two-story building. So you can see you can't see the roof line of the four-story building if you're standing on the sidewalk on our side of Turnpike Road and or on the other side of Turnpike Road. You can't see over that. And then I wanted to bring the sight line also to the location of the project entrance. So there's an area between the existing tree line that's staying in the corner, the pocket park, and kind of where you might look up the site driveway. And that's the bottom view shed here. And what you see is you're looking over the clubhouse, and you're seeing the four-story building, building 4, that's about 450 feet from the road. So you can barely catch, and basically you're seeing just the front left corner of that building. You're not getting the full face of that entire building, but you'd catch the top of the roof line. So it essentially would look like an extension of the roof line slightly from the top of the clubhouse. So you can see how that would be seen over that. We also looked at, I know that Monica wasn't here at the last meeting, but Ed had suggested, and I haven't added this to the plans yet, but I just wanted to show it to say that we looked into it. Monica had asked a couple of meetings ago for us to kind of make this building a part of the community. So we looked at the architecture and come back with an architectural plan to add a front door to the building to basically welcome it to the neighborhood and have pedestrian access into the building and have it not feel like the rear of a building. Ed was concerned more with the view shed of the building and kind of breaking up the view shed. So you can see on the top of the page is an existing triangle or tree line that exists there. Then there's the new front door to that building. And then we could do something like this and incorporate a berm that's approximately 3 feet tall and vegetate it. This building is 2 stories, but if we wanted to break up the facade further, we could certainly do something like this. To put we'd put trees. The berm would be approximately 3 feet tall. It'd be 10 feet wide at the top. We could put some trees and shrubs around there, in addition to the stuff we're already doing along the streetscape, and that would provide some privacy at the back of those units and also screen and break up the facade along Turnpike. So it could be kind of the best of both worlds as far as what we were discussing before. So I just wanted to show you that, and if that's something that the board would like us to incorporate into plans as we move forward, we certainly can.
Okay, hold on. Ed, what do you think?
That was along my thoughts. I didn't, if they want to put a little closer to the street, that's fine, you know, but yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
That works for
Gwen?
me.
I'm good.
Monica?
Works.
Nan?
Yeah, so this would be as an alternative to the current landscape plan. And so it would have a lot fewer trees in the front, and the building would be much more exposed.
No, I think what we'd
Is
try to
that the
do
idea?
is, this would try to be integrated into the current landscape plan. So there'd certainly still need to be plantings around the foundation of the building, and would certainly still have street trees. So I'd ask Lorraine to relook at this section of the area and kind of incorporate this into the existing design.
So basically you incorporate a berm into the
With some
designs
additional
on there.
plantings, right.
So what you're thinking is it would be very similar to the existing landscape plan in that area, but it would incorporate a berm through the middle of it.
With some, I believe most of this portion
on,
of the area.
hold on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a question, and it's kind of yes or no. Do you like the idea of putting a berm there?
Not particularly, but
Okay, Henry,
I'm not,
I'll come back to you. Henry, you like the idea?
Yeah.
Mike?
I'm okay with it. It's interesting splitting the front, so parts berm and parts
So
not.
6 of us like the idea of putting a berm there.
Got it.
1 is opposed. So if you go back to Lorraine and pull something together, it may sway the 1. How's that?
Got it.
Okay.
it's
Let's
not
move.
something I'd
Let's move to the
disapprove
next one.
project over.
It's getting late. So let's move to the next.
That was it?
Okay. So, any questions from the board for the applicant? Monica, Glenn, Ed? Mike, Henry? Nan? Okay. This is a public hearing, so I open up for the public. Anyone from the public wish to come and speak? We're into I think the 3rd meeting, so if you have something new to offer, we'd, appreciate it. You can stay right there. Don't go too far. It'll go.
Okay. Bill Cassidy, 83 Turnpike Road. Mr. Chairman, planning board members, ladies and gentlemen. Both my wife Donna and I, we've lived on Turnpike Road for 31 years. And what is it about Chelmsford that keeps us here? It's the green spaces, the appreciation of the planning board and the predecessors that have the vision for allowing the openness, the green spaces we enjoy every day. Mr. Coleman is right about the town being approximately 495, excellent school system, the affordability of the town, the core of the town's spirit of volunteerism, pride, investment in the community within themselves, the family and the town is what makes Chelmsford shine. Mr. Chairman, I totally agree with you. Had this project been in the middle of the overlay district, there would no doubt to be smoother sailing, but that is not the case here. My wife and I have been to many of these planning board meetings, 130, Stonegate, to know how the planning board process works. But what is the difference between this proposed 104 versus 130 and Stonegate? Both developers at Stonegate and 130, by the way, was a 40B, they had the flexibility to listen to the abutters, and they took that into consideration. They gave back to get some in return. Both sites are wonderful neighbors, blending in with the neighborhood. I can't say that I see this flexibility at 104 Turnpike fitting in. I'd like to give a little background. I was raised in Dorchester, East Boston, South Boston, triple deckers, very tight, no green space. Lived in Waltham, Lowell. For a while, my wife and I, we were in the rental property business. We get out of it. It's a tough business to begin. I don't deny that. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the developer prior to the start of any of these meetings for the informal session that they had to get the abutters' concerns concerning this proposed project. After the first and second planning board meeting, my buy-in has vanished. See, many times the developers fail to acknowledge the abutter concerns by not addressing them at all. I mean, no party can say they're surprised that they wouldn't get any resistance out of this plan, as is mentioned in the housing January 2017, page 23, about the development likely to encounter significant resistance if proposed zoning exceptions are requested. In addition to many of the abutters providing input, I also requested the parties to fully consider utilizing the existing 30-foot easement connecting 104 lot, working with the Alpha Road abutters, called as Plan A. I also asked the parties to explore working with the town of exploring a Tracy Road extension project, called as Plan B. Also on the safety issues concerning signage, sidewalks that needs to be addressed for Turnpike, which I'm starting to hear, which is good, I call this Plan C. I did this for solutions for public safety in mind, with the increase in both construction and tenant traffic, which is going to happen on Turnpike, Warren, and Mill. In the plans of A, B, and C, the response from the applicants have been very little to date. And I would like to make it clear, if this project is approved, please make sure that the 20 or 25% of affordable housing is duly recorded, the registry deed, and the book and page number. For I don't want to see, I don't think anybody here wants to see another mishap that happened in the past concerning a Route 110 development on the assigned low-income house that was sold at market rates due to failure to record at the registry of deed. The question that I have is, what is with the 168 number fixation obsession? Is it more financial in nature? I mean, perhaps the developer needs to step forward and say, look, we need this 168 number to minimize operating in the red versus black. None of us want to see this project go from black to red. That would not be good. In closing, I feel that this project, no doubt, is at crossroads. And I expect to see the developers set up the next meeting to show that the fire in the belly to move forward with this project, that they are fully committed short and long term on this wonderful housing project. That is yet to be shown, and that is a big concern for me, my wife, and other abutters I've spoken to. I don't envy them, because what has happened, speaking with numerous abutters, a lot of them are upset they're not here, is that the seeds have been planted. The seeds of doubts in their mind concerning this project and what this is going to do for the neighborhood. And now I feel the developer must step out the plate to knock a grand slam out of the park for both the abutters and the town. Only time will tell as the clock is ticking. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael Cooney from Stonegate Road. I'm also a Stonegate board member for the last 20 years. I'm the board president right now. So I'm representing 62 homeowners that live in Stonegate Road. I thank the gentleman for kind comments about Stonegate Road. Property values have remained high. We remain a great place to live. And a lot of people stay there for a long time. I live in Chelmsford because my father-in-law was the owner of a business store here, and my wife and I decided to stay here to be part of what he started. He was Rowley's Market, the owner of Rowley's Market. And when I'm in this town for 25 years and I meet people who knew him and talk about him and the town, and I love being part of this town. I want to be part of a town that can vote for new schools. My children went through the school system and was voted down because the older residents in town didn't want to vote for it. I want to be the older resident now that does vote for it. So I do want to stay in the town, and I want the town to be nice. This project is not what I'm looking forward to in the town in general, not even my own neighborhood. This will be the largest development in the whole area according to a recent Lowson article. Turnpike Road is not a numbered road. It's not a Route 129, Route 1, or Route 3A. It's Turnpike Road. It's a residential road. As far as the letters we get were read that said that the businesses inside are happy about this project, good for them. Can they find access to this project from their side? That would be a huge help for the traffic part of Stonegate Road. I mean, of Turnpike Road. Traffic is a huge issue for us. So if you can access the other side, that would be a huge, huge help. And there's some way to do it, that'd be great. That would really eliminate the traffic problem. Turnpike Road by 129, I bike it every day. I can't go straight across the Golden Cove Road. Now I'm turning right and going left up River Neck Road, and that's really hard for me on a bicycle to do. In a car, I get to Turnpike Road 129 in the wintertime, I can't get through the light. Light turns green, my wheels spin because it's up and uphill, turns red, I'm in the intersection and cars are coming this way. That's only going to become worse with other drivers coming in. And as far as the people coming in to live in Stonegate Road, I'm happy for them to find a place to live. I think there'll be probably younger people who drive quicker, are distracted with their phones, and there'll be more traffic and more accidents to Turnpike Road as it stands right now. Sidewalks right now won't be slated to 2023 if they get slated at all. Turnpike Road will be even more tedious with pedestrians and vehicles to coexist. Difference between the white line right now is 6 inches in places. People to walk their dogs, ride their bikes, run, 6 inches. Bus coming one way, UPS coming the other way. There's no room for people to move right now. I'd like the sidewalks to be addressed. Please stick to your own purpose and intent of the overlay, which states not to disrupt neighborhoods, and build something that's compatible and complementary to the surrounding neighborhood. We love where we live, and I want to stay there for a long time. Thank you for your time.
Hi, good evening. Chris Bowman, 3 Julia Street, Precinct 4 representative. And do we have a marker so I could use the whiteboard paper? Okay, sorry for the people in back, but, I see the.
Nan, can you turn your microphone towards her?
Oh, sorry.
No, just her, Nan will turn hers towards
Okay.
you.
The crux of the problem, as I see it, centers on how does the CEIOD apply to the BAOD and therefore to the project. Okay, so the CEIOD went into effect around 2013 or so. Specifically by its name, Community Enhancement and Investment Overlay District, with the intent of providing enhancements for getting people to invest in the empty commercial buildings, particularly along Billerica Road. But it doesn't just apply to the IA, which Billerica Road is in. It applies to the commercial districts of CA, CB, CC, CD, and IA. So, because of the special attributes of the CEIOD applies to each one of these commercial districts. So the CEIOD special attributes are imposed upon these commercial districts to take advantage of the enhancements and improvements for the commercial areas. In subsection 113 for residential multifamily housing, CEIOD specifically states that residential multifamily housing is not allowed in the IA. It's prohibited. It doesn't say that for any of the other commercial districts, but that it calls out. So any project in the IA under the CEIOD, residential multifamily housing is prohibited. Now, then we have the BAOD, which was passed in 2016, last year. Now the BAOD also specifically allows residential multifamily housing in specific areas according to the BAOD map, which shows Turnpike Road and Mill Road. So this is a specific use. The BAOD also has a provision that says that the CEIOD shall apply to all BAOD projects. So what this means is that the CEIOD special attributes are also imposed upon the BAOD, just like we have in the other districts. So by the CEIOD itself, just looking at any project in the IA prohibits residential multifamily housing. By virtue of the subsection 195-147, it says specifically that the CEIOD shall apply to the BAOD. So with the CEIOD, with residential multifamily housing prohibited in the IA, that is also applicable to the BAOD. Just from the CEIOD bylaw, and then reading how the CEIOD applies to the BAOD, you come up with the same result. Residential multifamily housing is not permitted in the IA. However, in section 195-144, the applicability for residential multifamily housing is shown in the BAOD map. So this map clearly shows along Mill Road and Turnpike Road, the properties along those roads are outlined in orange. The zoning map legend is orange. Orange is the designation for RM, Residential Multifamily District. The legend also has a specific color scheme for the other districts. The color scheme for the IA is gray. So there is no qualification or modification to how the CEIOD applies to the BAOD in the bylaw. There's no modification or qualification in the zoning map or the BAOD map. And specifically, Turnpike Road and Mill Road are outlined in orange. So that's specifically taking the designation from the legend of RM and applying it.
But that was not the intention at that time. The intention of the orange outline was an exclusionary zone, right, Evan? It was an exclusionary zone of commercial development within that BAO district in the IA. Okay?
I understand what you're saying.
That was not, let me finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay? Let me finish.
Sure.
So, based on your theory here, okay, you're saying that residential is not allowed anywhere in BAOD because of, you're going back to the CEIOD and saying it wasn't allowed in there. We passed the CEIOD in 2013. The BAOD was in 2016,
Right.
which is subsequent to the CEIOD. So if we didn't want residential, if the intent was not to have in residential, it wouldn't have been in the BAOD. And I think the town attorney pointed out that it is allowed, residential is allowed in this area, in the BAOD. Okay?
Yeah,
So
I'm not disputing that. Okay, no, wait a minute. I'm trying to, going by the language and what's present. The language in the bylaw applies, and the zoning and BAOD maps apply.
So if you want to go by the language, 195-147 is applicability of the CIOD to the overlay district applies.
Right.
Okay? Applicability, which is one section of the CEIOD.
Right.
Okay? And it has, which is the part that we allow projects into the CIOD special permitting process, the BAOD special permitting process. So we can split words, but,
Okay.
so.
I am just relaying to you how I read the language for your consideration. And
Okay.
I see that that's all I can do at this point, just point it out to you, and to please consider what I am relaying to you.
Okay, I think Mike has a question for you.
Yeah, I just sort of wanted to push this over to our town attorney. Does the color of the legend on the various maps that we have any bearing on whether any portion of this area is in fact RM or not? I wouldn't think that it would. I mean,
I'm not really clear on where we're going with the color of the legends.
I'm trying to figure that out too.
The BAOD includes, was passed and it included a map that designates the areas within the IA zoning district that will be part of the BAOD. That is the BAOD. If I can point out, section 195-143A discusses the purpose and intent, and it says, address changing town and regional market conditions, specifically the desire by employers and employees within the limited industrial IA zoning district to have local access to goods and services and housing. All right, so I was the chair of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee in 2013 when the CEIOD was originally being reviewed. And at that time, the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee had a specific desire to not include housing in the IA district as part of the CEIOD. The adoption of the BAOD indicates a clear desire to override that earlier zoning provision and make in certain areas within the BAOD to allow housing.
Okay. Thank you.
Another question?
I have a comment. Having been
Why put your microphone? so
Yeah.
people-
Sorry. Having been involved with the development and drafting of both the BAIOD and the CEIOD, when we considered the CEIOD industrial usage, we were covering any industrial area in town. And for any industrial area in town, we felt that, and every industrial area in town, we felt that it was not appropriate to consider allowing by right multifamily housing, because we have some fairly small industrial areas, we have the mill buildings, whatever. So that CEIOD allowed multifamily in all areas that were included in the CEIOD, except the generalization of industrial areas. Several years later, when we addressed the BAOD, we specifically desired to have multifamily in that area. It was indeed written specifically to include multifamily and businesses in the industrial area, but only specifically in the 129 industrial area. So while the BAOD section refers back to the CEIOD in its entirety, it also, before it refers back, provides several exceptions to or additions to the provisions of the CEIOD. And one of those special conditions is the acceptability of multifamily in that specific industrial area. The other thing of note is if you look at the new updated zoning map, areas are designated both by color of area and color of lines. And the code for the map defines areas and lines. So the RM area that is within the CEIOD is indeed defined by an area color designation. And the special area that permits only multifamily as an alternative to industrial and not commercial applications is designated by a line. And I'm not positive, but I think that line is actually red, not orange. But
No, it's orange.
nonetheless, it's a line, it's not an area designation, and the code defines the explanation of a line in that color as opposed to an area in that color. So the summary is simply this area is designated IA, not RM. It is permissible by definition for multifamily because that's specifically what we wrote into the BAOD. And it was specifically the intent of the BAOD.
Okay.
Ed.
Wanna- Okay.
Good, yeah.
I'm going to point out something on this map. And I'm probably wrong. It's getting late and I'm probably wrong. But we've got some other areas up here outlined in orange also. That has nothing to do with multifamilies. Those are exclusion zones from development. Those are single-family exclusion zones, and they just happen to be the same color is what was drawn here along along Turnpike Road. So I guess I don't think that when we drew this map for town meeting for the BAOD approval, that we were thinking colors meaning RM and things like that. We just had a few different colors, red for tall building zone and orange for, we used orange for two things, exclusion zones
Yeah,
that were gonna stay single family.
yeah,
No,
as an
what
area.
it was an exclusion zone to not to allow the commercial, certain commercial aspects that the CIOD and the BAOD would allow. For instance, it would not allow a bank with a drive-through into that, or a restaurant, into these areas, because these areas, especially this one up here, I forget the name of the street, I think it's, not Monmouth Street. The residents came in, they're all single-family homes, and they stated, so someone could put a restaurant across the street from us. And we said, you're right, we're gonna put that in the exclusion zone. So we put those in the exclusion zone. So this map is not a zoning map. This map is a map of the overlay district, okay?
Yeah.
Which happens to be, the border happens to be the IA district, okay? That's all this is. This is not the official zoning map. This is an overlay map. If I'm incorrect, please tell me, but this is an overlay map for the overlay. Am I correct in my statement?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. So I'd just like to offer a few more things for your consideration.
Okay.
The zoning map and the BAOD map are within the bylaws. So it's applicable to the bylaws, number one. Number two, color schemes and legends are interpreted specifically, and it does seem to me, at least for clarity, that a color, if it wasn't specifically intended to have IA dimensions, that there should have been some sort of modification or qualification or color scheme to denote that. And in addition to that, both the BAOD and the CIOD are subject to the use regulation schedule in attachment 1. When going to attachment 1 under IA for multifamily housing, it says no, not permitted. So, but the only districts shown that do permit residential multifamily housing is the CV, which obviously the BAOD is not, and RM. So all this information together appears that RM is the proper zoning designation, and because of that, everything else flows from that, okay? Dimensional requirements, density, everything flows from that. So this is the crux of the problem. So I offered what I see within the bylaws and the maps and the use regulation schedule for your consideration. The other consideration is that Turnpike Road and Mill Road are residential roads. They have been for decades. The residents in these areas, a great majority of them, have been there for 30 years or more. They should be taken into consideration of the impact on them in the residential area. And from that perspective,
I'm going to take exception to that statement.
Okay.
This board goes to great lengths to try to weigh things. You know, so we take into consideration a lot of things. We have a decision to make. They're not easy. It's something. So you know,
No,
I think we try very,
No,
very hard.
I understand. I'm just
speaking
trying to
for myself. I won't
summarize.
speak for the others, but I think they agree with me.
Yes, I'm not disputing that. I'm just trying to present things for your consideration in your decision-making process. That's all. So from that point of view, looking at the physical scale of Mill Road and Turnpike Road and the single-family homes, a project that is a quarter to a third of the size would be more applicable to fit in and to blend in with what already is in that area and is consistent with the purpose and intent of the BAOD to not disturb the neighborhoods and to not detract from the character of the town. So I present this to you. I thank you for your consideration of everything I presented. And do you have any questions for me?
Nan? Henry?
Comments?
We'll come back to comments. Mike?
No.
Monica?
I have no questions.
Glenn?
I got a comment, but I'll word it as a question. On Turnpike Road, both ends and in the middle, is there not industrial buildings?
There is a credit union on the Billerica Golden Cove side. And at the other end on Turnpike Mill, what was allowed is two-story commercial buildings. They're office buildings, and I think one has may or may not have do some research or development and manufacturing. I'm not exactly sure.
And
in the middle, there is one-story commercial office buildings. So the scale of what exists as far as commercial activity right now along Turnpike Road fits.
But the comment of it being 100% residential road is wrong. It's not. It's a mixed use.
No, okay. I understand what you're saying. The dimensions of Turnpike Road as compared to Route 129 in the commercial area, Route 110, and even Route 4 is a residential road. This is what I mean by that. The dimensions of the road are a residential road. This is why Mr. Cooney was saying that there's difficulty with people who walk and ride their bikes on the road with cars, because there's not much room for flexibility because it is a residential road. It's a narrow road. So I guess I should have said narrow road instead, and therefore I will. It is a narrow road.
Thank you.
So, any other questions?
Ed?
Comments?
Not going to lengthen this discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else from the public?
My name is Richard Stander, 153 Turnpike Road. Notice it's an odd number, so for that side of the street. I first want to just, I guess, express some feelings. I had been driving down I-95 this afternoon, and some of the towns along the highway had massive apartment complexes there, 4 stories high, possibly higher, and I just felt that that really underlines the problem here. They just don't fit very well in neighborhoods, in residential areas. They're an eyesore. They're so massive that they just stand out. And I just don't feel that a project of this size is a good fit for the Turnpike Road area. Also, I wanted to discuss the traffic situation, and here are some of my concerns regarding modifying the intersection of Billerica Road, Golden Cove Road, and Turnpike Road. That's already been modified not all that many years ago. I'm going to just sort of guesstimate 8 or 10. there was property that was taken from one of the historical buildings there, and like an artificial wall put in there. I know the homeowner had expressed in articles in the newspaper, the Lowell Sun, that he was angry about having eminent domain come in and, just take away property from a historical site and to widen that particular area. So I guess I'm asking myself, well, what other modifications could be done to enhance that intersection to help with the traffic flow? And I just really don't see that happening. There was also discussion about a sidewalk going in, and I just want to point out some facts here that, because I've looked at my deed, talked with some of my neighbors, and the telephone poles on the odd side of Turnpike Road, which would be opposite where this development is going in, are also the boundary markers for those individual single-family homes. So that is where your property ends, and I'm right on the edge of the pavement. I mean, there's not even 12 inches of space there. In most cases, you'd be lucky to get 6 inches if you're just measuring, straight across horizontally before you'd be touching the telephone pole there. So very likely the sidewalk would have to go on the other side of the road, the 104 side.
I think that's what the plan was, is for the even sidewalk going down the even side of the street.
Okay,
And
but
part of what we talked about earlier was the survey needs to be done in order to figure out where the boundaries are, where the sidewalk could go, and if there are private property, what are those issues, that type of thing. So.
Okay, well, I wanted to expand on that and just sort of take the Warren Ave sidewalk installation as an example. Turnpike Road, as was previously stated, is a narrow road. It's a country road. It's not a state highway or anything like that. It has always been narrow. And on Warren Ave, that was wider than Turnpike Road, in my opinion, when they put the sidewalk in, and the sidewalk was great, but it did narrow the driving area. Now, if we have residents, in particular children, riding bicycles, the way the law is written, they're supposed to be riding on the street, not on the sidewalk with their bicycles. So that, if we put that sidewalk in, very likely it will narrow Turnpike Road for the residents even more, and you're going to have a situation where I think it's putting the children that will be using the street, riding their bicycles, et cetera, in more danger. So I am concerned about that. The fact that the speed seems to be high, because if you look at a map, it's Turnpike Road is as straight as a ruler. Yes, it goes up and down a little bit, but people tend to drive fast on that. Another thing particular to my property, there's a telephone pole right at the end of my driveway, and there's a large diamond-shaped sign there that's just hung by one lag bolt up at the top. That is very frequently struck by other vehicles, in particular trucks, but any kind of a tall vehicle. People are driving down that road, and the turnpike, the telephone pole is right abutting the pavement there. So there's very little gap. People are hitting that sign, and it just swings around. It makes a tremendous noise when it does get hit, and that could be any time of the night. If it gets hit, it's going to wake you up. So you take that into account, the sidewalks and everything else, it's going to be a less desirable situation if we put the sidewalks in and we increase the traffic flow on Turnpike Road. And I wouldn't, my feeling is this should be taken into account very heavily. This is not a small problem, and it's a problem that really dates from the fact that this is an older community. The road was never wide to begin with, and now we're expanding and expanding, and we're kind of changing the whole usage of that road. So I'm very concerned about this fact, and concerned about the safety of the residents in our area. Now, Turnpike, having a sidewalk would be great, but if the children are going to be riding on that, there's going to be less area. So these cars are going to be coming by closer to the bicycles, and I am concerned. I would never like to see any child get hurt or injured, and I just think that this is going to increase the probability of that happening. So it's a complicated area, and just overall, I don't feel that 168 units fits very well with Turnpike Road. And I would like to point out that, as was previously pointed out, many of us have been in Turnpike Road for a very long period of time. I've been there since '87, fall of '87. We're longtime residents who like the area. We'd like to preserve the character of that neighborhood. But so much development taking place, it's really taking away from the character of our neighborhood. And I am just very troubled that anyone could come in and make place such a large project in what is really a neighborhood area, a residential area. And I think that it's the size of it, the sheer size of it. It's like building a skyscraper in a residential area in Cambridge. It just doesn't fit.
I will remind you that it's an IA zone, and that if it wasn't residential, there theoretically could be a commercial building there.
Understood, but
I think it's 211,000 square feet or something like that would be allowed. Is that the right number? Over 200,000 square feet.
Right.
It could be a contractor's garage, could be a trucking terminal, could be just about anything, and it's allowed in IA. So that's the balance we have here. So
well, I sort of understand that to a point, but the Workers' Credit Union down the end of the Turnpike Road, that's not really, I feel, much of a distraction to the neighborhood.
I would love to have a bank in my neighborhood.
The industrial areas, the industrial condos at the top of the hill just before you go down the end of Turnpike Road. Most of us don't even notice that when we drive by. It's not a bothersome use of the property. So, whereas an apartment that's 24/7, and it just is going to really substantially increase the usage of Turnpike Road. So I am very concerned about the traffic situation, and I feel that the talk of a plan to modify the intersection that I started out with at Golden Cove Road, Bill Recker Road, and Turnpike Road is just kicking the can down the road. The problem is going to be there, and are we going to have an effective plan when all that traffic comes? I don't feel that we will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public have anything new to offer? Jeffrey?
Good evening, Chairman, Board. I'm Jeff Gomes, 95 Turnpike Road. I also work for Mass DOT as a traffic engineer, so I do review about hundreds of these traffic studies in my regular course of work. I would like to say the format and methodology is good. I concur with Jeffrey Dirk. Highly respect Jeffrey Dirk's work. I concur with the methodology and format is up to state standard. One concern that I do have is the lack of mitigation for the site based on the size of the project. I do believe it is too dense in terms of the number of units. If I saw this project, the traffic study that was proposed came to my desk and I saw the lack of mitigation package that was proposed, and I would send it back and say, try again. The lack of sight distance at Mill Road, at Turnpike Road, that there wasn't, it's an existing condition. There's also the project down the street that there's going to be concerns addressed there through that project, and there's going to be a look back, which is comforting on that note. I do want to make it clear that the intersection of Golden Cove and Turnpike Road, the impacts there, on average, is going to add about 12 seconds delay with the project with no mitigation. The mitigation proposed by the proponent is that we're going to change the arrows in the street, which can be done for $300 worth of thermoplastic. One way that I would propose to mitigate some of this impact is to reduce the number of units, and so I would move to deny the 20% density bonus based on lack of public benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public? No? Okay.
5 minutes. I don't have anything to add, just procedurally. We've covered pretty much every technical topic. So traffic is here today, done architecture, stormwater, lighting, landscaping. I think the board needs to identify if there are additional data requests that you're looking for from those technical elements of the project.
I'd like to hear from the applicant on the last speaker. It spoke about dropping the 20% mitigation for the traffic.
Yeah, go.
I'd like, Dave Guthrie, applicant, I'd like to offer my perspective on your bylaw, your overlay district, the density that we have here, and also your density bonus. Under your bylaw, you require 25% of 50% AMI, which is something we've committed to, but it's also more prohibitive than the 40B process, which is 25% at 80% AMI. In doing so, you then allow a density bonus up to 20%, which then dilutes that affordability component to 20% of 50% AMI, which allows you to use this entire project into your housing stock against the 40B number. And I think there was some thought that went through that process. Otherwise, I don't think you would have written a bylaw that would be more prohibitive than the 40B, because I think the intent of the bylaw, and I don't speak for the authors, but the intent of the bylaw was to drive housing into the designated areas under your control of site plan review through the architecture and the landscaping, which 40B doesn't allow. So in our opinion, if you strip this project, or any project similar to that, of that density bonus, you've then created a situation that is more prohibitive from a development standpoint than the 40B.
Based on the 50%?
Correct.
Yeah. But if it was 80%?
You'd then be equal to the 40B process and not subjected to the increase in architectural design, which is expensive, and the landscape design. The entire site plan review, quite honestly.
So if we were at the 80%, then does all the units count towards the affordable?
If it was approved as a 40B.
Okay. I'm just asking the question.
I know, it's,
the way, the intent of the bylaw is to allow the town to count 100% of the units towards their subsidized housing inventory. So under the applicable requirements, if 25% of the units are affordable at 80% of area median income, you get to count all of the projects. Or if 20% are affordable at 50% area median income, you get to count all of them. So the intent of the bylaw is so the town will be able to account on a rental project only. The intent is that the town gets to count all of the units, including the market rate units. So whatever the number is, it has to be either 25% at 80% or 20% at 50%. I think that the discussion with regard to a density bonus here is misplaced in the sense that there is no baseline density. The density is being set based upon the discretion of this board in its capacity as a special permit granting authority. Right? Because there is no underlying density for residential at all allowed in the IA district, the BAOD gives you the discretion based upon site planning concerns to decide what the proper density on a particular site is. Right? So I don't think you should be focusing so much on the density bonus itself, and instead should be focusing on what's the appropriate number of units, and then are we going to be looking for 25% at 80% AMI or 20% at 50% AMI.
So, but bylaw does not account for us going to the 80%.
Correct.
So we have to be at the 50%, 50-20. 50% AMI, 20%.
I think it's fair.
Correct. There's no discretion on that.
Yeah.
Actually,
So, okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, let's be clear about this. The BAOD specifically requires 25% at 50% for rental projects. Under your BAOD, if we were doing a for sale project, it would be 25% at 80. Okay. What David's saying with respect to the density bonus is, if you think about it, by requiring the developer to provide 25% at 50% AMI, which is more stringent than the 40B and more stringent to what you apply to for sale projects under the BAOD. The incentive for the developer is to not go 40B with these projects, but to come in under your BAOD, because by getting the 20%, if they get the 20% bonus, by giving you a better project than they would have to do under the 40B in terms of design, landscape, amenities, all of that. And not to mention the fact that all of your other bylaws and this board's participation is out the window. The developers are going to look to that bonus to come under this bylaw, because then if you grant the 20% bonus, technically the project then drops to a 20% overall percentage of affordable at 50%, and it still qualifies for all the units to be counted. Yeah. So that bonus is the incentive that brings developers in here to give you housing at 50% AMI. If the bonus isn't there, no one's going to come.
Please understand, this is our first shot at this.
No, we completely understand. I understand. Just trying to help you to understand it as we understand it.
Okay. And
if you don't grant that 20% bonus,
right, they're going to go 40B route.
No, forget that. Then the 168 units do not all count, and then that defeats the whole purpose of what town meeting adopted.
I understand.
So that notion of itself is misplaced, and then to tie that to reducing units because you want to reduce traffic, that's why you did a peer review. The peer review, and the peer review consultant, can correct me if I'm wrong, indicates that the traffic as proposed and as designed and as analyzed is warranted, and that the impacts are not significant. So the board, you got two choices here. It's either you're going to be data-driven, or you're going to be arbitrary and want to pick and choose as you get closer to approval. And again, I'm going to remind, because I had a conversation in the hallway with Tracy Cole. I think there's still a lot of confusion in the neighborhood that what you see on that site plan with additional parking and less green space could be built by right under underlying industrial zoning. You could have four-story office buildings by right. So this notion that this project is more detrimental than what could be built there under industrial zoning doesn't hold any logic with me. That's why the planning board did the overlay to specifically encourage multifamily, because it has less impacts to the neighborhood. This is residential to residential, which is more compatible than residential to industrial. But I know you guys may understand it, but the neighborhood hasn't heard from you what I'm saying. And until they hear it from you, they don't believe what other people say. I think it's a disconnect between the neighborhood and what the zoning actually is intended to do. This is exactly what you intended, and this is what you got. But that needs to be said.
This is going to be visited in January in a work session. I'll tell you that right now.
You're going to, and we're going way off topic, but by January, the business development director will be on board per the Board of Selectmen, and I'm sure, I can guarantee you, we're not going backwards. Projects on 129 are going to keep coming to you. They're going to get bigger and more complicated. They may not be located on Turnpike Road across the street from single family, but they're coming. And they're going to be bigger, and they're going to be more complicated.
Unfortunately, this board's in a situation where we have to make a decision.
Right, and all I'm suggesting to you is do it based upon data.
Okay, if you can't ask questions, we don't get data.
No, you can, but the notion of reduce the density because it feels good, it looks better, that's not data-driven, right?
I gotcha, and you can go in different routes too, but it looks like, Paul, you had something to say.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to go back to my point, is the intent of the provision of the bylaw is to get you to the point where it's 20% at 50% area median income. And the way it does that is it requires the 25% and then provides the bonus. But that structure is a little squishier here because of the fact that there is no underlying density that's allowed. So there's no real bonus, and you almost have to back your way into it and then add it to it.
And that's what happened. That's what was presented at the last meeting.
Right.
It was backed into
So my
it
point
by
is
figuring
we
square
should
footage.
not be focusing then on what the density bonus is, because it's not a real bonus. It's really just to figure out the numbers.
So it's the base unit that we should be focusing.
It's what we should be focusing on, I think, and as Evan was trying to make the point, is focus on the impacts. What is the appropriate density? And as I outlined in my letter, that is up to the board's discretion. And that should be tied to direct impacts from the project. And it should look at, whether those impacts are greater or lesser than what is allowed under the underlying zoning.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Repeat that last sentence.
In exercising your discretion,
Yeah.
and whether or not to issue the special permit, you need to be looking at what the impacts of this proposed project are, and you need to not only look at the impacts as it relates to the neighborhood, but as it relates to what would be allowed under the underlying zone.
And that provision, that statement's in the COID bylaw.
Jeff, you had a comment. I'll come back to you.
Yeah, regardless of the density bonus issue, the underlying issue is the mitigation, and just referring back to the traffic study, page 37, due to negligible impact to the traffic conditions, no mitigation is required. Well, I think their mitigation package has been negligible. I think that's the problem, is that it's not a proper response, not a proper mitigation package for the impacts that this project proposes. And I think if you want data, it's data driven by their own analysis that they've submitted. Thank you.
Hold on a second.
I just want to briefly clarify that my point to speaking tonight was not I had heard the chair say that perhaps if the number of units is not necessarily in our favor, that we would go the 40B route. That my intention was not to threaten the board with give it to us this way, or we would. I was just offering you the development perspective from 25 years in this business, reading your overlay district bylaw, which I thought was very well done, looking at this particular project and saying, well, this is something that the town is inviting us to do, coming through with the applicability, and then proceeding through this definitive process. So my offering to you was, if it's not something that I'm threatening in the 40B process, but if you're not inviting proponents to use your overlay district through some sort of process that's less restrictive, then
So I apologize if I.
No, I just want to make it clear. Yeah, I
wasn't meant to be.
Okay.
What I'm looking at is, again, this is the first time out of the gun for us, and I think by asking some questions that may seem strange or may be a little off, it helps us clarify that if we have to do something in the future or tweak something in the future, we'll have those answers. In my mind, I think there's a couple things that need to be tweaked. Okay, but asking those questions and hearing what you have to say, my next question to you was, if there's something that can be given to lessen the impact, is there a way to reduce the density? In other words, you have some amenities like the pool. If you took that out, you say that's a huge cost for us, not only now and later. That helps you reduce the costs. I mean, it's not a lot. It's something that I look at this. I just say it's 1,100 car trips up and down the road. And if you can reduce it even by 100, it helps. And it's a difficult decision. So there's no denying that the buildings look nice. There's no denying that they're laid out well. Having the parking under and some of the garages there, I mean, those are nice amenities to have. You don't have to go out and clean off your car. So
I can offer you there are four factors that drive the cost of this. One is the architecture, the extent of architecture, the number of gables, the metal lined hoods. There's quite a bit there. The peaked roofs versus a flat roof. The undulations in the building, very expensive to do. No matter what happens, this is a $2 a foot market. rental market all over town. That is your threshold for there. So independent of your design, which is going to can move 20% in this particular situation, very cost prohibitive. The other one is that two-story building in the front. That was something that we felt we heard from the neighbors and we heard from the board to reduce that. Very inefficient construction design there to have 2 stories, a lot of roof, a lot of foundation, equivalent to the 4-story, yet you only are able to recover revenue from two floors there. So that's very expensive. The architecture the landscaping in the green space area, it's very substantial here. And the last one really is, and we saw this as something that, there are 2 more. One is the garage under parking. But we did see that as a benefit to the community if we were able to capture some of the residents that want to downsize from their large primary residence in town, but be able to age in place and park under the unit and get in an elevator. And the 50% AMI is something that is not in the 40B process. It's more of an 80% AMI. Takes our market rate rental units from $2,000 to $2,100 down to $915, and our 1-beds from $1,700 or $1,800 down to $780. And that's why I think you see a lot of these 40B come in and they hang on to that 80% AMI. So those are the factors that you plug into a formula and you plug in your land acquisition and you say, do the numbers work?
Can I say something?
Sure.
All right. I've been hearing a lot about density without a clear definition as to what that means. And when I think density, I think from a planning perspective where we think of density as population density. And that's kind of what's going to drive the traffic and what's going to, just make this area either a lot busier or just slightly busier or whatever. Okay. If in this format, our density is going to be based on these residences and people that are going to work and coming home at night, under the underlying zoning of IA, you could have 3 shifts of industrial use with trucks and things like that. So I think that's one reason we're kind of looking at residences as a buffer to the neighborhood. Now the reality is when you have 168 units in a suburban context without any other travel options, then we're pumping people onto Turnpike, which I think we're all concerned about. I think we have some ideas of trails and sidewalks and things like that, but there's nothing definitive, and that's my concern. It's supposed to be live, work, play. We're supposed to take on a village concept, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, without even considering these other ways to divert traffic actually into the 129 business area, I just want to make sure we're not making the same mistake that we're trying to fix. I would like to see something definitive, because then it makes more sense. Then maybe the density as related to population that travels on Turnpike won't be as bad. But then again, I'd like some data saying, okay, because it's an idea. I mean, I took 1 transportation planning class. I'm not a transportation engineer. I'm just a planner. So if you want to provide data based on that, then maybe we can make a better decision, okay? That proposed trail there, I don't know where you are in terms of easements and things like that. And I wonder, are the businesses that abut that invested in this? And if they're not, then what are we doing? And that's it.
May I speak briefly to that? So we are still trying to contact the neighbors about the trail. I think the problem that we're running into right now is this is a district of over 600 acres. 600 acres that is not going to be developed at one time. So everybody has to do their part, but we can't put it all together with one project. And this is one project on Turnpike Road that we're trying to do the best we can within the limits of what we have control over. We're looking towards the future. We're looking towards, when we talk about mitigation, mitigation means you're mitigating an impact, a discernible impact. And I think what you've heard tonight, based on our traffic study and the peer review engineer, is that there are minimal impacts to those intersections. Certainly we're adding more cars to an existing road, but the impacts are minimal, and we're looking to future to look at that as far as retiming of lights and additional safety improvements to benefit those areas. We're also looking to be a taxpayer in the town of Chelmsford and continue to bring additional tax monies into the town of Chelmsford, and also we're providing which is supposed to be for traffic mitigation, the $100 per parking space at $32,600, that's supposed to be our kind of give into the area to deal with traffic and pedestrian mitigation. So those are our kind of items of mitigation. We're committed to working with the neighbors in this area. We've had an attorney reach out multiple times to the neighbors regarding the trail and potentially looping the water. We continue to commit to do that, but we can't twist their arm and make them do it right now. This district is going to evolve, and it's going to took a long time for us to get here, and it's going to take a long time for us to put it together. So it's really the best we could offer right now.
It's too bad you couldn't have been at the meeting at 6 o'clock. There was quite a bit of talk, and there's a lot of stuff coming.
So, question is, where do we go from here? So one of the things is, in the traffic study, talk about look-backs after a year at a couple of intersections. So the question is, because that's new terminology for me, is, how does that work?
The peer review consultant's going to suggest some language in his final memo.
Okay. And who's responsible for those look-backs and data?
There'll be a time frame. The developer will pay for it and submit reports to the town. We can even include where they come back to the planning board and present.
Okay. So the next one, I guess I would like the DPW to look at whether their offer about the survey on Turnpike, the sidewalk, is worth asking them to do in lieu of some of the 53G. So I'd like to get a little feedback on that. We're going to do the landscaping in the front.
Yes.
Monica, I don't know if you saw, you must have saw the plan with the front door.
Yes.
Okay. They addressed that issue. You're going to talk about, do we have anything for the fire department?
Yes.
We do, right? Yeah. What other issues that we want to hang out there for them so we can get this wrapped up? Go ahead.
Yeah. I would like to see a comparison of the number of trips generated by this plan as compared to the number of trips that would be generated by a similar square footage of commercial office space.
I might be able to even help you with that a little bit. My family's property that was just sold, that's just being sold in Littleton, property went for 7 figures, is half the size of what this is. There's wetland restrictions would even require it to be down further. 52 trucks a day will be going out of that facility, and 52 trucks will be coming back a day before you bring the employees and stuff in. It's heavy.
So, in terms of how does this compare to a by right
on a
commercial?
on a 4-acre parcel,
Yeah.
they're going to have about 400 trips a day.
So, Katie, is that something your office can
It's
put
something we
together?
can easily do
Sounds
with
like-
IT. Absolutely. We can provide you a chart for the next
Okay.
meeting.
What other topics do we want them to hit on? Mike, anything?
No, I think you've covered it.
Ed?
No, I just think, I'm wondering if we're at the point of having Evan start preparing a draft
Yeah.
decision, because this is going to be heavy wording. Because of the 40B, it's going to have to be circulated to a lot of parties. Not a 40B, a affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Who's it going to be circled to?
You're going to want to make sure it's got a stuff in there about deed restriction and stuff like
Yeah, I'd
that.
mentioned my memo, my recommendation was that the planning board work collaboratively with David Hedison from the Housing Authority, the Housing Advisory Board, and Town Council. So if I draft a decision, those are the resources I would reach out to.
Yeah, we want it to
for
be
initial-
airtight. We
Oh,
want
yeah.
it to be
Oh, yeah,
airtight,
yeah, yeah.
and we want it to be forever, not
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah.
Because I've personally run into in my business, in what I did in a previous life, with affordable housing in Chelmsford that became no longer in the inventory. And so, through various means, just not, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So we want that airtight. The other thing I'll throw out there, and I'm getting ahead of the game a little bit, but I'll throw it out. Evan can start writing. Do you guys have any objection, if this thing is decided positively, of a condition in there that says if you develop an access, a construction access to Alpha Road, that you make it impassable after construction is complete? In other words, we can figure out the land. In other words, I don't want it to become a cut-through road.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, that's
When it's temporary.
Pardon?
Temporary for construction only.
Yeah, it has to be somehow, because what I'm concerned is we've got a gate on Alpha to prevent a cut-through road, and I don't want this to become a cut-through project.
Okay.
That's it for me for tonight, right now.
All right. Glenn? You all set?
I think I'm just gonna agree with what Ed said about, I think we've beat this thing to death enough, and we ought to just start moving forward to get it finished up and.
Okay. So, I'd like to tie up the loose ends in the next meeting.
Yep.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay, just so everybody understands, they say everybody is thinking, oh geez, they're gonna wrap it up. It's decided. It hasn't been decided yet. But since day one, when we had our first meeting, this project has changed tremendously. As the developer has commented, it's cost him money. He's gone from a 3-story building in front down to a 2-story to bring the scale along Turnpike more in line. If you want to see this project, you can go over to a condo development called Chelmsford Village across from the McCarthy Junior High. The clubhouse, the pool, and the 4-story buildings are almost the exact same layout, if you didn't know it. They're called the Rose Garden in that project. And that project is surrounded by condos to keep the visibility down. Here we're going to surround it with garages and a 2-story building. So there's a lot of similarities to another project that's been in Chelmsford for almost 40 years. Almost, it's going on 40 years right now. They have underground parking, they have 4 stories, they have elevator service. I think the pool's a nice amenity, might help them get that rent he's looking for. So a lot of stuff has come along. Developers made a lot of, I think, positive changes. Actually, he's dropped the building also, beside reducing the size of one. And so I think there's been a lot of positive things that as we go back and forth over the laws and the density, there's a lot of things that have moved along on this project. And so that's all I wanted to say, Judge.
Thank you. All right, so you got it. Evan, you're gonna do a little more work. Thank you to Mr. Haverty Attorney Haverty for being here this evening. I think the game plan now would be to continue to our October 25th, Evan?
Can I add
November 8th.
November 8th, sorry, November 8th, today.
Can I add one more thing? I think we should put a limit on when people can drop letters off for a meeting. Dropped in at the last minute before, I really think is putting a lot of people on.
So November 8th is our next meeting. And then after that, our next meeting will be in December.
13th.
December 15th.
13th.
So I think that would be the night to if everything works out for the next meeting, we'll close the public hearing and then take the vote in December. Sound about a right
Well,
game
I'll have a draft ready for November 8th.
So we'll play it by ear at that point.
Mr. Chairman, will you want me here for that meeting?
I don't think
Unless you get another letter.
I'll have Paul review the.
Well, yeah, once you review the
We'll
draft,
take it from
then
there.
we'll-
Yeah.
All right?
yeah. Schedule tends to fill up, so I just wanted to ask you.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion that we continue to November 8th, 104 Turnpike Road, Planning Board 2017-06.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, seconded by Glenn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Meeting minutes, we don't have any old business, don't have any new business, don't have any committee reports. UMass Lowell West Campus is all done. We presented a report at town meeting and
Yep.
it's available, so.
Except the usual,
I got one quickie before we quit. Can we make it so we get our packets the Wednesday before the meeting instead of getting them the day before the meeting, so we have time to look at them?
We need to know.
I don't know if we need to put that in the form of a motion or just,
Yeah, I would recommend you put that on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss,
okay.
while you can kind of,
I'm not trying to throw
administratively try
anybody
to
under
do
the
it.
bus.
If it's that important to the board, you're gonna have to try to take a vote and, but Colleen will be here, we can discuss it.
It's just,
I know part of the challenge is that, it doesn't get posted till Friday, and that's normally when she sends it out.
Yeah.
So that Friday works a lot better, just for the applicants, staff. I understand where, if we have information prior to a Friday, we could send it out to you. At that point, it gets a little piecemeal.
We're not even seeing the agenda now till Tuesday, so we
Or
need
Wednesday.
to.
I wasn't aware of that. Okay. Let's
We
have
need to get
let's
back
Put it on
to-
the agenda, we'll
All
have a
right, okay.
conversation.
We'll have a conversation next one. Okay? Mike?
Have a motion to adjourn?
Mike, motion by Mike, second by Henry to adjourn. All those in favor?
Are you eating or you going home?
I gotta eat. I haven't eaten since 10:30 this morning.
Where are we going?